the light from above. My name is David Kenny. I'm preacher for the Wadsworth Church of Christ in beautiful Wadsworth, Ohio, located on 236 West Good Avenue. Glad you can be with us on the program today. Today we're asking the question, does God exist? Last time we looked at what was called the cosmological argument. This time we're going to look at what's called the teleological argument. And specifically, we're going to look at the idea of a fine-tuned universe and a planet. And we talked about, there's a lot of books out there, and some of them are very complex. And we're really trying to keep things very basic so you can understand what's being talked about. And then hopefully if you understand these things pretty easily, you can go, and if you want to, you can research some more scholarly works along these lines. But for these lessons, we want to try to keep things pretty basic. Take a look at this passage again in 1 Peter 3:15. Notice it says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear." And we pointed out that that word defense there, underlined in red, is the Greek word apologia. And we looked at one reference work that defined or discussed this term apologia. And notice some of the things, I'm not going to read the entire thing again, but notice the highlighted section, what it says from this linguistic and exegetical key to the Greek New Testament. The writers state the word would aptly describe giving an answer to the skeptical, abusive, or derisive inquiries of ill-disposed neighbors. You see, some people, they don't want to hear any of these arguments. They don't want to know about God. They don't want to know about the Bible. They don't want to hear about it. Maybe they think that, if there is a God, if there is a judgment, that they'll be able to say, well, I just didn't know God. I just didn't have any idea. Nobody ever told me. Or God's not going to be fooled by that. He is not going to be fooled by that. And before you pass from this earth, you will have wished that you looked at the evidence. I mean, you make whatever decision you want to make. That's up to you. A Christian's responsibility is to present the evidence, not force people to believe it. It's up to you to look at the evidence and examine it and make a decision for yourself. But realize, with that decision, you're going to stand before God to give an account for it. And if you think that you're going to be able to claim ignorance or you didn't have time or whatever, keep in mind, you can fool your boss with that stuff maybe, but you're not going to be able to fool God. And that's something you need to be honest with yourself, because there is going to be a quiz at the end of our life, and we're going to give an answer for what we've done. And we also point out, the Bible is one of the best evidence for the existence of God. And even though we're not really going to be talking about that specifically as far as it being evidence, since we've already had a series of lessons on that fairly recently, I want you to remind yourself the Bible is evidence of a divine mind, and that divine mind is God. So don't forget about that. But we're going to look at some other evidences outside of the Bible that we can use. And one of those is called the teleological argument. Let me ask you a question. I brought in this watch. This is my grandfather's watch. This is pocket watch. His name was Otto Everett Saffel. He passed away in July of 1991. He was a superintendent of streets in Woodsfield, Ohio. He was a very hard worker. He worked very hard. Matter of fact, he would expect his crew to work hard, and sometimes they didn't like that too much, but he didn't expect them to work hard without him right there working as well. If he had them work hard, he was right there with the shovel, or he was right there with the broom, or whatever they happened to be doing. But let me ask you, if you look at this watch here, did someone make this watch? Look at these characteristics. It's old. It's a pocket watch. This is a photograph of it. It's made by Elgin. It has a second hand at the bottom of the face in the number 6 position to measure the seconds of each minute of each hour. It's made of gold with gold-colored face, with black bold-faced numbers and markings of the minutes between each of the numbers, tracking both the minutes of the hour and the hours of the day. And on the back it has his initials engraved in it. Now, suppose that you happen to come across this watch, and you may not know much about it, but hopefully if you come across this watch, you'll give it back to me because I misplaced it. Hopefully I don't do that. But you examine its features, and you may wind it, because you say, well, it has to wind. You make sure it keeps time. You notice the manufacturer's name is Elgin. You realize from the initials on the back that somebody owned it before, so there's somebody owned it. But there's certain questions that you generally don't ask. You generally just assume. Questions like this: did somebody design this watch? did somebody make this watch? Did this watch just materialize out of nowhere? Or was this watch, did it evolve from something else? Maybe a rock or something like that? Did maybe this watch evolve from something? Could that be? I mean, we don't even think about those questions. Evolutionists would tell you things like, well, given enough time, they always want to throw time into the equation. You take note of that. First, when I was in school, it seems like it was millions of years, and then it's billions of years. They can throw all the time they want to at their theory, but it doesn't help them. And we can see that with the idea of the teleological argument. Now, this watchmaker analogy, that was really popularized by a guy by the name of William Paley. And he made the argument in his book called Natural Theology, or Evidence of the Existence and Attributes of Deity. And he's not the original person of his argument, but he's generally the one looked at as the one who made it very popular. And he talks about going through the woods, and maybe you stumble upon a rock. And you might think, well, that's pretty old. But then you come across a watch. And you look at it, and it produces motion, it keeps track of time, it has interacting complex parts, it has made of different materials for different purposes, like the glass so you can see through it, the steel for the springs, the brass so it doesn't rust right away. And he makes this statement about that after describing in detail this watch. He said, the inference, we think, is inevitable, that the watch must have had a maker, that there must have existed at some time and at some place or other an artificer or artificers who formed it for the purpose which we actually to answer, who comprehended its construction and designed its use. And that's the watchmaker analogy. And to keep in mind, he isn't the first one to use timepieces to illustrate this purpose. This argument has been around for quite a while, this teleological argument, and using a timepiece for it. Take an example here. Here's a picture of a guy by the name of Cicero. Now, his full name is Marcus Tullius Cicero, and he lived about 106 to 43 BC. And he makes this argument, and it's interesting, in his argument, in his book, he calls it the nature of the gods, plural. And that's why I put it up there in parentheses with an S there, because he's a polytheist. The Romans worship multiple gods. But notice his statement here, which he made in his work. When you see a sundial or a water clock, you see that it tells the time by design and not by chance. How then can you imagine that the universe as a whole is devoid of purpose and intelligent when it embraces everything, including these artifacts themselves and their artificers? And that's a quote from his work, The Nature of the Gods. So the teleological argument for the existence of God has been around for a long time. And I want you to think about the relation of a timepiece and design. If there's design, there has to be a designer. That's what the teleological argument is. But I want you to really think about that. We have watches and we have calendars. They're designed to measure time. They measure time in seconds. They measure it in minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, seasons, and years. We have all these devices to measure time. But all those things are measuring the things that happens out in our universe. So if you have a device that measures time and you recognize the design of it, you ought to be able to see that what it's measuring is designed as well. It seems like people ought to be able to get their hands around that pretty quickly. The teleological argument for the existence of God, let's take a look at it. What exactly is it? The term teleological comes from the Greek word, two Greek words. Teleos means the entire, perfect, or complete. And then the teleos, the part at the end of it, logi, is the end, goal, or result. And it's a pretty straightforward argument. Where there's design, there must be a designer. You often think about the idea of cause and effect. That sort of goes along with that idea as well. Now we're going to examine what is called the teleological argument for the existence of God as it relates to the universe and our planet. But before we do that, let me give you another example of someone else that used the teleological argument for the existence of God, and that was President Ronald Reagan, one of my favorite presidents. And he made this statement in his book. The editors of the book picked this out, a statement that he made back in May 30th, 1988. He made this statement in the chapter Wit and Wisdom of Ronald Reagan of Speaking My Mind. Sometimes when I'm faced with an atheist, I'm tempted to invite him to the greatest gourmet dinner that one could ever serve. And when we have finished eating that magnificent dinner, to ask him if he believes there is a cook. I mean, people go, well, yeah, but yet atheists seem to be disconnected from that reality. I wish we had more presidents that recognize the existence of God and the importance of studying His Word, the Bible. And they would take it more seriously, like Ronald Reagan did. He was a great president. He wasn't perfect, but he did have a respect for God. And he realized that atheism was false. You know, when I was talking about these lessons with my father, incidentally, he made this pulpit here for me, this nice pulpit. You know, it didn't design itself. He's the maker of it. I mean, that's another example. He has a pattern he used and created it. It didn't just materialize here for the studio staff to put together. He actually created it. He made it. I'm very thankful for it. It's just another example of design. You know, you recognize the design of it. You know, my father made it. He's the designer of it. And so that's just another example. And when I was telling him about the lesson, he made this reference to this passage in Hebrews 3, verse 4. It says, "For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God." And that's very important for us to remember. God is the builder of all things. And just as you know that your house is built and it had a design, even though you may not totally understand every intricate thing about your house, you recognize there's a plan. There's a designer. Someone built it. You recognize those things all over the place. The same is true with our universe, and that's what we're talking about. Notice this passage in Psalm 19 and verse 1. The psalmist clearly proclaims that God made the heavens and the firmament. The Bible claims that everything was created by God. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. Notice that term shows. It shows it. It declares it. We can know it. We can look at it. We can measure it. God is basically challenging you to know that He exists through His creation. It's not like He didn't leave us any evidence. The question is, are we going to pursue it? And are we going to pursue all the evidence? So let's take a look at the design of our planet briefly. Here's our beloved, beautiful planet Earth, our home. You know, in the news, people are all consumed with the idea of making sure that the Earth, you know, it's all delicate, and we don't want global warming and climate change and blah, blah, blah. And they know the Earth is very it's very balanced, and it's very delicate. But do you ever wonder, do you ever stop and think how it became that way? I mean, it's like, you wonder, have they given any thought to that at all? I mean, for example, the Earth is 93 million miles away from a 12 million degree sun. How did it get there? Who put it there? It just randomly happened? I don't think so. If it was 5% closer, we would be like Venus. Venus has about 900 plus degree temperature. Or if we were 20% further away, we would be like Mars, severely cold. And we know other things about the Earth too, like 75% of it is basically water, so it maintains our atmosphere so we can breathe, and on and on and on. We see design in our planet. Well, if you recognize that design, the teleological argument states you must recognize there's a designer for it. Otherwise, it's not design. That's the argument. And it's pretty straightforward. There's a real powerful video that I recommend to you that you look at. It's called The Privileged Planet, How Our Place in the Cosmos is Designed for Discovery. And it's a very fascinating video. I'd like to show it, but I don't have the time to do that. But I encourage you to get that video. A friend of mine recommended it to me, and I've watched it a couple of times. It's fascinating to watch. But they debate two basic views of the universe and the Earth. One they call the principle of mediocrity. The idea that, you know, the Earth's here, you know, there's nothing special about it. It's like Carl Sagan called it, that pale blue dot. There's really nothing particular about it. And if you had the ability to go out throughout the universe, you'd find all kinds of Earths like ours. If you had the ability to travel throughout the universe, you would find that. I mean, take a look at Star Trek, for example. Star Trek, I don't know if you ever realized it or not. You know, when I was a kid growing up, I'd watch it and I enjoy it, and I still do. I still enjoy the program, science fiction. But it's heavy on the fiction, real heavy on the fiction. You know, it's really saturated with with evolutionary thought. And you can see it, several episodes, they believe in evolution. Well, that's sort of the idea of the principle of mediocrity. You know, if we can find the right variables, we'll find Earths all over the place. And then you have the argument that the video makes, the principle of privilege holds that the earth is in a special position. It's privileged. It's privileged because it has all these designs. It's fine-tuned to be able not only to support life, but to support the discovery of the universe. And that's important to note. So in this video, they argue or discuss these two views of the universe and our planet, the privileged planet, how our place in the cosmos is designed for discovery. I really recommend you watch that. Have you heard the statement, the fine-tuning of the universe argument is based on the teleological argument? Maybe you've read something called the rare earth hypothesis. The rare earth hypothesis was from a book from Peter Ward and also a Donald Brownlee. Ward was a geologist and a paleontologist. Brownlee was an astronomer and an astrobiologist, and they wrote a book called The Rare Earth, Why Complex Life is Uncommon in the Universe. And the writers explore numerous factors that are required to support life on a planet. And it's interesting that, you know, as the different factors increase, the odds of finding life somewhere else is very difficult. It becomes more and more difficult. And that's their hypothesis, the rare earth hypothesis. And then in 2001, astronomers Gonzalez and Brownlee put forth a theory they called the galactic habitable zone. And I really found that fascinating. And what they did was they not only looked at the Earth and all the properties that were, you know, for life that exists on the Earth, but they also looked at the universe and how the universe impacts the Earth as well, and says, okay, we have to have these factors in a line. For example, they listed 20 factors. I'll just give you a few of them. Correct location in the galaxy, not too close to the center with a black hole and not too far away from supernovas. Supernovas that would disrupt your life real quickly. The correct distance from a sun, we talked about that. The correct type of sun, you want a sun that's not too hot or too cold. One that's protected by surrounding planets from comets and other dangers. You know, meteors, we've heard about that in the news lately. You want a moon to stabilize the tilt of the planet on its axis. You want it to be a terrestrial planet. You want to have plate tectonic activity, a magnetic field, oxygen-rich atmosphere, and liquid water, and all those things. And, you know, in the news, they'll come up and they say, we think we found water on Mars. And they're all excited about it. And they're like, oh, this proves that if life existed on Mars, it could exist everywhere else. And if it existed on Mars and exists on everywhere else, it evolved. And if it evolved, there is no God. I mean, that's exactly what they're trying to say. But you know what? Even if they found water on Mars, that's only one. That's only one of the variables. Life could not live on Mars without significant investment in equipment and things like that. One may find any of these ingredients, water, you know, sun not too hot. You could find all these 20 different things individually, but that's not enough. You have to find all these different characteristics simultaneously. That's important to note. See, when all these variables that support life on a planet are all added up, the Earth is very rare. And these two scientists, they named their theory the galactic habitable zone. And they estimated basically the odds, the probability of finding them simultaneously to be 1 to the 10 to the negative 15th power. Now that's 1 in 1,000 trillionths, I think. I mean, that's a huge number. And when you think about the number of stars that we think there is, which is about 100 billion, you start to realize, and you start doing the math and probability, which we're not going to do on this program, you really come to the realization Earth is rare. Life on Earth is privileged. How do we get here? Who fine-tuned all this so we could live here? And not just live here, but put us in this position of the galaxy that we can enjoy our lives and the safety thereof. And that's important that we keep in mind. You know, this idea of fine-tuning, you know, you can't let it go to chance. For example, Robin Collins in the work The Case for the Creator by Lee Strobel, he points out that the fine-tuning of our planet and the universe, you can't just leave it to chance. He has some information about Collins. He triple majored in applied mathematics, physics, and philosophy at Washington State. He graduated summa cum laude with a 3.93 GPA. He started a master's degree at the University of Texas in Austin. He was majoring in theoretical physics, but he decided to go ahead and get his doctorate, and he graduated with the highest honors for the defense of his dissertation. Incidentally, his dissertation was called Epistemological Issues in the Scientific Realism/Anti-Realism Debate, an Analysis and a Proposal. Don't make me read that twice, please. But notice what he makes this statement in Strobel's book. Over the past 30 years or so, scientists have discovered that just about everything about the basic structure of the universe is balanced on a razor's edge for life to exist. And notice what he says. The coincidences are far too fantastic to attribute to this to mere chance or to claim that it needs no explanation. What's he saying? Things are too fine-tuned in the earth and the universe to think that it's by chance. And you've got to explain it. You can't dismiss it. It's not just randomness, it's by design. And where that design is, that's not by chance, there has to be a designer. And that's clear. It's clear. That's the teleological argument. Let's take a look at, what the implications are. Some people say, give me some persuasive evidence. That wouldn't persuade anybody. Well, it persuaded Anthony Flew. Anthony Flew was a devout atheist. He was so sure in his confidence of atheism that he had agreed to debate Thomas B. Warren. Thomas Warren was a Christian, debated him in 1976, and Flew was so adamant in his atheism, he affirmed there is no God. Atheists generally don't do that. They generally want to be in the negative and make the Christian prove there's a God, and then they'll criticize what they put forward. But as I stated, Flew was an atheist, but I don't use that term in the past tense because he died. He did die April 8, 2010, but before he passed away, he changed his mind. He changed his mind, and he put out a book explaining his change of mind. And the book is called, it went from there is no God, he scratched out the word no and wrote there is a God. He changed his position from atheism to one that resembles deism. He basically affirms the same position that Albert Einstein did. Remember in the last program we pointed out Albert Einstein denied being an atheist. He denied it. He believed in what was called Spinoza's God. Now that's not the God of the Bible, but he denied being an atheist in very unequivocal terms. That's important to note. But in one of the sections of the book, Flew makes this statement in the book, in the chapter, Did the Universe Know We Were Coming? He makes this statement. Some have said that the laws of nature are simply accidental results of the way the universe cooled after the Big Bang. But even such accidents can be regarded as secondary manifestations of deeper laws governing the ensemble of the universes. Again, even the evolution of the laws of nature and the changes to the constants follow certain laws. We're still left with the question of how these deeper laws originated. No matter how far you push back the properties of the universe as somehow emergent, their very emergence has to follow certain prior laws. So, multi-universe or not, we still have to come to terms with the origin of the laws of nature. And the only viable explanation here is the divine mind. Now, you might say, well, this, everyone's atheists aren't persuaded by this. Flew was. And Flew was, you may not recognize the name Anthony Flew, but if you lived during the period when he was alive and you were in hot and heavy into the atheism, theism debate, he was at the top of the list of the atheists. And he changed his mind. Oh, he didn't become a Christian. I'm not trying to misrepresent him here. He became what he called a mortalist, but he denied atheism. What prompted him to do that? What prompted him to change his mind? Unfortunately, Anthony Flew ran out of time. He ran out of time to pursue all the evidence. Incidentally, in the last chapter of his book, or towards the end of his book, he allows a friend to put an article in there, The Defense for the Resurrection of Jesus Christ. But he ran out of time. Friends, don't make that mistake. We know that there is a God. We know that he designed the universe. And we know the Bible is his word. Thanks for watching our program today. We'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. Don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, it has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people, or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And the key word's faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.
In this world we have our troubles. Satan scarcely must evade.